Yeah. Jayo Radha Madhava Ajayo Kunja Vihari 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 Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Ajayo Girivaradari Jayo Girivaradari Jaya Jana Vallabha Ajayo Girivaradari Jayo Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Ajayo Girivaradari Jayo Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Ajayo Girivaradari Jayo Girivaradari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Dana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Dana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Ajayo Kunja Vihari Jayo Radha Madhava Jayo Kunja Vihari Jayo Kunja Vihari Jayo Kunja Vihari Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Jagannath Jai Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jai Jagannath Jai Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatu Me Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatu Me Jayo Radha Vallabha Sri Radhe Vallabha Sri Radhe Jayo Radha Vallabha Sri Radhe Radha Vallabha Sri Radhe Jayo Radhe Jayo 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 Sri Radhe Jaya Giri Govardhan 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 Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jayo Nitai Doyal Jayo Nimai Sundar Jayo Sundar Nimai Jayo Nitai Doyal Jayo Nitai Doyal Jayo Nimai Sundar Jayo Sundar Nimai Jayo Nitai Doyal O Nitai Doyal Jayo Nimai Sundar Jayo Sundar Nimai Jayo Nitai Doyal Jayo Nitai Doyal Jayo Nimai Sundar Jayo Sundar Nimai O Nitai Nitai Doya Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Gaura Nitai Jaya 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 Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Guru Deva 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 Srila Guru Deva Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Srila Guru Deva Grandhara Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to assembled, Hare Krishna. All glories to assembled, Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayet Srinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Savana Kirtanaha Hridantasto hi abhadrani Vidhunoti suhutsatam Nastaprayeshu abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regular attendance in classes on Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with the transcendental song, is established as an irrevocable fact. So we are in Canto 6, Prescribed Duties for Mankind, Chapter 12, Vritrasura's Glorious Death, and text number 17. Text number 17. Pranaglahoyam samara Pranaglahoyam samara Ishvaksho vahanasanaha Ishvaksho Vahanasanaha Atra na Gnayate Mushya Atra na Gnayate Mushya Jayo Mushya Parajayaha Jayo Mushya Parajayaha Pranaglahoyam Samara Ishvaksho Vahanasanaha Atra na Gnayate Mushya Jayo Mushya Parajayaha Pranaglahoyam Samara Ishvaksho Vahanasana Atra na Gnayate Mushya Jayo Mushya Parajayaha Pranagloyam Samara Ishvaksho Vahanasana Atra na Gnayate Mushya Jayo Mushya Parajayaha Pranaglahoyam Samaram Ishvaksho Prahanasanaha Atra na Gnayate Mushya Jayo Mushya Parajayaha Pranagloyam Samaram Ishvaksho Vahanasanaha Atra na Gnayate Mushya Jayo Mushya Parajayaha Pranagloyam Samara Ishvaksho Vahanasanaha Atra na Gnayate Mushya Jayo Mushya Parajayaha Pranagloyam Samara Ishvaksho Vahanasanaha Atra na Gnayate Mushya Jayo Mushya Parajayaha. Yeah, word to word meaning by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Pranaglaha. Life is the stake. I am this samaraha, battle. Ishu akshaha. The arrows are the dice. Vahanasanaha. The carriers such as the horses and elephants are the game board. Atra, here in this gambling match, na, not, gnayate is known, amushya, of that one, jayaha, victory, amushya, of that one, parajayaha, defeat. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. O my enemy, consider this battle a gambling match in which our lives are the stakes. O my enemy, consider this battle a gambling match in which our lives are the stakes. This is the typical Vedic way of fighting. It's not like today's world where you fight. If I'm victorious, that's fine. You are not going to die, but you get maybe, you stand second chance. But in Vedic times, it's either you live or I live. Both are not possible. So the stakes are that the life itself, the arrows are the dice, and the animals acting as carriers are the game board. No one can understand who will be defeated and who will be victorious. It all depends on providence. No one can understand who will be defeated and who will be victorious, because it's Daivanetrena. We don't know what is going to be the outcome, and this is what we find in Mahabharata battle also. We don't know who is going to be victorious, and therefore there is a quality of the Lord is called Gambhira, which means that his heart is known only to pure devotee, not to others. And therefore how he plans, an ordinary person cannot understand, let alone an ordinary person. Even exalted personalities like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva cannot understand. That's what we find in the instruction of Bhishma Dev to Yudhishthira Maharaj. He says that, well, time is all according to the time, but ultimately time is a representative of the Lord, and therefore it's the Lord's plan, and no one can understand Lord's plan, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma and other personalities. So here the same, no one can understand who will be defeated and who will be victorious. It all depends on providence. And who is saying this? It is Vritrasura. So, oh my enemy, he is calling Indra as my enemy, and then he is giving this instruction on the battlefield. It's amazing that the Vritrasura is having a demonic body, but yet he is giving this instruction. I think there's an interesting story from Betal, Vikramaditya and Betal. Anyone has heard those stories? Maybe seen those stories? Yeah. So in one of the stories it goes that the two couples, they were traveling in the forest, and suddenly some dacoits come and pick them up. And then they take them to their cottage, and there typically you have the Kali Devi. And they say that these two men, young men, should be offered to Kali. And therefore they take their swords and chop their heads. And these young ladies became so much distressed, that young couples, and they found that suddenly their partners have been beheaded. And they weep and weep. And in that they say that, "O Mother Kali, now that you have taken away our partners, there is no use for our life, and therefore we are going to give away life." And in that agony, when they say that, Mother Kali appears in front of them. And then she says, "Okay, what you do is take the heads and place on their respective bodies, and they'll become alive." In their happiness, what they do? They exchange the heads. So therefore the result is that the body belongs to your partner, but the head belongs to the other person. And the Betal now asks the question to Vikramaditya. He says, now, who should marry whom? Who should have the partner? Is the person the body, or the person who's the head? And if you know the answer and you don't tell me the answer, your head is going to break into pieces. So therefore, what is the answer given by Vikramaditya? He says that you should opt that partner whose head belongs to you, not the body. So in that answer, we get that head means the consciousness. So the consciousness matters, not the body. And this is what we find in this story, or in this pastime, where Rudrasura is having a demonic body, but his consciousness is so exalted, it's so exalted that on the battlefield, instead of using his bow and arrow, he is preaching Bhagavatam. He is giving instruction to Indra, who is equally an exalted personality, but still, compared to Rudrasura, there was a difference in terms of his consciousness. So in this verse, there is no purport. I'll just pick up a quick note from Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur on this verse. This battle is a gambling match. It is impossible for gamblers to give up this game, though they may find faults in it. So it is impossible for gamblers to give up this game. The fact that somebody is called a gambler, it means that the person is addicted to gambling. Otherwise, he wouldn't be called as a gambler. When we came new to Australia or Melbourne, we were told that you must visit Crown Casino. And therefore we said, okay, we should visit Crown Casino. So that was 20 years back. So we went to Crown Casino. They gave us some free coupons. And they said that since you're coming for the first time, we treat you as a guest and take these free coupons. And use this free coupon to play the game. And if you win, you take the money or the dollars. And if you lose, that's fine. But then if you want to play further, you can put your own dollars. So I think they gave us some $5 coupon, $5 to me and $5 to Nirmala Krishna. And we played that game. Obviously, we lost those $10. And they were expecting us to put our own money. We said, sorry, we are walking away. And we walked away, but for the next 3 months, every week we would get a letter from them because we had to sign our address and details. So every week they would send us a letter, please come and play. These are the exciting games available and you can indulge yourself. Whereas, so therefore we were not called as gamblers, we were just casual visitors to Crown Casino, played the game and then walked away. But here, it's a gambling match, it's a gambler, someone who's addicted. It's interesting that Jaideep, my son-in-law, he worked for some time in Crown Casino. And he used to say that how Crown Casino attracts its customers and nearly transforms them into gamblers. Depending on the amount of money that the person can gamble, they even send helicopters to pick up that customer from the residence. They send Benz cars and they treat you as if you are the Supreme Lord and bring them and make them addicted. So there are customers who lose continuously money and yet they play the gamble. And one such customer, Jaideep was narrating, happens to be unexpected state of Gujarat. Of all the states, a person from Gujarat, he came here as a migrant and he was like any other person, was working in a job, and then somehow he came in contact with Crown Casino and he started playing. Initially, he was earning little bit, but for every $5 he earned, he was losing $10. So to recover back that lost $5, he would play. And he became so much addicted, he purchased the property, he had to sell off his property, so he lost that wealth. Then he lost his job. Somehow he said, I must earn back my money. He brought, I believe, some $100,000 from his parents in India. They sold their property and got that money, and that also he lost. But yet, he continues to come to Crown Casino on a scooter, hired scooter, and then some days he earns money and some days he loses money. But when Jaydeep asked him, why don't you stop it? He says, I've become so much addicted, I can't stop, I must play. So that is the level of addiction the gambling is. Therefore, it's impossible for gamblers to give up this game, though they may find faults in it. And in this case, the life is at the stake, and the arrows, the dice, the carriers are like elephants are the game board. So we pick up the next verse. I'll only read the Sanskrit part, but you don't have to repeat, and then look at the translation and the purport. Sri Sukha Uvacha Indro Vrita Vacha Srutva Gatalikam Apujayet Grihita Vajra Prahasams Tam Ah Gatak Vishmayah. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sukadeva Goswami said, hearing the straightforward, instructive words of Vritrasura, King Indra praised him and again took the thunderbolt in his hand. Without bewilderment or duplicity, he then smiled and spoke to Vritrasura as follows. This statement, hearing the straightforward, instructive words of Vritrasura, straightforward, has touched me coming from Indian subcontinent. Because in India, how I have grown, and it continues to be the same, what lips speak is not aligned with what heart says. These two are not the same. And therefore, when our kids go to India, they are grown here and they go to India, they find totally different environment. Because here, what we speak and what's in the heart is the same. But in India, the children are totally different. What their heart says, what lips says, they're different, they're not the same. So it's not like hearing the straightforward, simple instruction. So King Indra praised him and again took the thunderbolt in his hand without bewilderment or duplicity. So therefore, without bewilderment or duplicity, so there is a duplicity. He then smiled and spoke to Vritrasura as follows. Purport. King Indra, the greatest of the demigods, was astonished to hear the instructions of Vritrasura, who was supposed to be a demon. He was struck with wonder that a demon could speak so intelligently. Then he remembered great devotees like Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj, who had been born in the families of demons, and thus he came to his senses. So once he understood, initially he thought that how is it possible for a demon like Vritrasura giving such wonderful instructions, that too on a battlefield. Look at the situation of Vritrasura. We'll have a short, we'll have a look at this situation. He was struck with wonder that a demon could speak so intelligently. Then he remembered great devotees like Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj, who had been born in the families of demons, and thus he came to his senses. Even so-called demons sometimes have exalted devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, Indra smiled reassuringly at Vritrasura. Commenting on this verse, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says, how can a demon have such devotion, knowledge and detachment? He has knowledge, devotion and detachment. First he was surprised and had no smile. In the beginning he did not smile. He was only surprised at the instruction of Vritrasura. But then, remembering Prahlada, Bali and others, he thought, Bhakti millions of times greater than ours is possible in even the demons. So please note, bhakti millions of times greater than ours is possible in even the demons. Thus his amazement disappeared. He became joyful and then smiled. So that means that one should not look at the externals and tries to judge a person. And this happens often. We have a pastime from Ramayana where it is said that Astavakra, as in, I think all of you must have heard the name Astavakra. We have Astavakra Gita also. Astavakra, Asta is 8, Vakra is bends. So therefore, here is a person who has 8 bends in his body. And he comes to Janaka Maharaj's court, and then in those days, like here, the stakes are the life itself. The stakes were the life, that is Jala Samadhi, that you argue on a Vedic philosophy, and if you lose the argument, or it's not an argument gives a negative meaning, it's a debate. So in that debate, if you lose, then you have to do Jala Samadhi. Jala is water. Samadhi is that you have to dive into the water and stay in that water. So long you can hold on to your breath, you are alive, and after that you leave the body. So therefore the stakes were the life itself. So as Astavakra walks into the assembly to debate, everyone starts laughing at him because he can't walk. His whole body has 8 bends and is not able to walk. And looking at that person, the so-called scholar with a team of scholars in Janaka's court, they all laughed at him. Then he counter laughs at all of them and says, and they ask him, why are you laughing? Then he says that I laugh at your ignorance, because you are looking at my external body with all the bends and you are laughing at me, whereas I have come here to debate on Vedic philosophy, and then I know who is going to be victorious, because you are not looking at my consciousness, but you are looking at my external body. So we find here that Indra was surprised at the external, the demonic body, and then he says that, wow, he is a person who is giving such wonderful instruction and in a demonic body. But suddenly he remembers Prahalad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj and other wonderful personalities who appeared, though in a demonic family, were exalted Vaishnavas, and therefore he says, Bhakti millions of times greater than ours is possible. And even in the demons. So we know that Prahalad Maharaj preaches to his own schoolmates, friends, and then transforms them into wonderful devotees. And look at Vritrasura, he never preached before. He is on the battlefield, and instead of fighting, he is preaching. And look at his current situation on the battlefield. He lost both his arms, is bleeding, and his soldiers all have ran away. And his body is so fearsome for anyone to look at. And in that situation, he is giving Vedic instruction, or is giving the highest instruction possible for a person to receive. Imagine ourselves in that situation. I've lost my both arms. I'm bleeding profusely. And then the other person he has dropped the weapon, but I'm telling him, please pick up your weapon and kill me. I'm fighting for the sake of the fight as a duty I'm performing, but the consciousness is intensely placed on the lotus feet of the Lord. He is eagerly waiting to join the Lord's lotus feet and serve Him. Which is that verse in Bhagavad Gita which talks about this, that you need to think of the Lord at the time of departure so that your next birth will be in Vaikunta, not here. Yeah, thank you. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajate ante kalevaram tam tamaivaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. So therefore, this is the test every one of us will be put to. And then it depends on the sadhana we have done all through our life. And in between, the Lord places certain turbulences to check or to give us an idea how far we have progressed in our consciousness, in Krishna consciousness. I'm trying to convey the concept through some examples because this is what I have experienced, or I witnessed these examples, so therefore I'm telling. Nirmala, Krishna and myself, we were on Govardhan Parikrama. I think that was a couple of years back. And somehow monkeys have fascination for Nirmala Krishna. Our very first visit to Vrindavan, we went from Delhi to Vrindavan in a taxi, and in front of the hotel, as she just stepped out of the car, the moment she stepped out of the car, monkey jumped on her and she was holding a bag of, I think, bananas. And then she picked up the bananas and ran away. Because at that time, Nirmala was not perturbed. She said, oh, the fruit basket has gone, that's fine. But this time, much later to that, we were doing parikrama in Govardhan Parikrama. And I think I was about 50, 60 steps ahead of her. She was behind me. And we were chanting and then doing parikrama. And Nirmala Krishna was holding her purse, I think. And from nowhere, suddenly a monkey came and jumped on her. Look at the consciousness of Nirmala at that time. She was chanting. We were in Holy Dham doing parikrama. So what should be her call? Either Radhe Radhe or appeal to Giriraj or call out Krishna. But instead she said, Shekhar, Shekhar. I was 50 steps ahead. And then she was saying, Shekhar, Shekhar. And then I turned around. She said, monkey, monkey. Then when she came to me, I said, Lord has given you a test and you failed in the test. If you had called Krishna, Krishna, then Krishna knows your consciousness. So be careful next time if such a situation happens, that what name do you call? Is it my name or Krishna's name? Maybe looking at her consciousness, somehow Gurudev understood her and Gurudev gave me Sri Krishna Das name. And since then he's told her, you always call your husband with the name. So therefore, now she can call next time a monkey appears, Sri Krishna, Sri Krishna. So what it means is that how intense our sadhana is in a given situation. Accordingly, we respond to it. So the sadhana of Rutrakesu although he failed at the time when when his son died as Chitraketu, but after he received the instruction from Narada Mahamuni, there was a transformation, and then he came out with flying colors, both at the time when Mother Parvati Devi cursed him, and then now after he received the body of Vritrasura. So he retained that consciousness, that exalted consciousness which he received, or which there was a transformation, and then he was chanting and glorifying the Lord, and that consciousness or that nourishment you find he is displaying on the battlefield. I'll give a practical example how training is important and how training can play a major role in your consciousness. My father-in-law was an army officer, and he was always on, as you know, I think people coming from India, they know that the army officer or a central government employee, they are transferred every 3 years. And sometimes, being the army, they are transferred to a place where the property is not made up of brick and concrete, but it's made up of wood. This sort of an understanding doesn't come to a civilian, but possibly because he was an army officer, he had that understanding, and he said that we should get, or he said to my mother-in-law that you should get trained how to respond if a fire occurs. As a civilian, I never thought that I should train myself or train my wife how to respond if a fire occurs. But my father-in-law, he said, no, you should be trained. And typically army officers, they come back by 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon from the office. The morning go at 8:30 and then come back by 3 o'clock. So at odd times, odd intervals, he would shout at her, "There's fire, fire!" And then she has to run, wrap herself in the blanket and roll on the floor. So he trained her, this is how you can protect yourself. And he did that her so many times. So it became like we have here fire drill. They say that, okay, the bell goes off and then whatever work we are doing, we have to stop and then walk out of the building. And they have a timing. Within that given time, you should evacuate the building. And then you get a siren, evacuate, 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 and you have to walk. Does it happen in your school? Yeah. So therefore, similarly here to my mother-in-law, he has done so many times, whether there was a fire or not, the moment my father-in-law comes and says, "Fire, fire," she would jump and wrap herself with the thick blanket and roll on the floor. And he said, well done. So that's how he improved her chances, or he improved her by giving that exercise. And funny enough, when they were in Delhi, in those days, it was not, I'm talking of 35 years back, 35, 40 years back. So in those days, there was no gas stove. It was all kerosene stoves. Have anyone used kerosene stoves? Yeah. So it is not easy to lit, and when you lit, you are not sure how the flame is going to be. And she was on silk sari, and then coming from Tamil Nadu, they are lovers of coffee. They want to have a coffee in the morning, 4:30, then have a coffee breakfast, then have a coffee in the afternoon, then coming back from office, they have a coffee, and the night time once another coffee. So therefore, I think she was trying to prepare coffee, and suddenly her sari caught fire. But what saved her was the drill which was given to her by my father-in-law. She jumped into the blanket, wrapped herself, and rolled on the floor, and that protected. Because after that, she went into a shock. But at that time, when that incident happened, her response was so good that she could protect herself. So what it means is that our sadhana should be so good that when we are facing the normal turbulences in life, which we'll be facing in life, and finally the final turbulence at the time of departure. So at that time, what is our consciousness? And this is what we find in Vritrasura's case. He has displayed that consciousness because he nourished himself by chanting and glorifying the Lord. So if we do chanting and glorifying the Lord regularly, or Gurudev says that saturate your consciousness with antarangika shakti. That's the term he uses, we heard a couple of times when we attended his retreats. Saturate your consciousness with antarangika shakti. Antarangika is the internal energy of the Lord. How? By chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And by hearing Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Nityam Bhāgavata Sevaya. Although in India it says Saptaha Bhāgavata Sevaya. Nowhere in Bhagavatam there is Saptaha Bhāgavatam Sevaya. It is Nityam Bhāgavata Sevaya. So our process as given to us by Srila Prabhupada through the disciplic succession is that we should do the Pancharatrika Vidhi and the Bhagavat Vidhi. In Pancharatrika Vidhi you do the deity worship, and then in the Bhagavat Vidhi you do the chanting and then Harinam distribution. So that's part of the Bhagavat Vidhi, and here Śrīmad Bhāgavatam regularly, that places our consciousness in that exalted position. So what it means is that we will encounter problems in our life, and the solution is material problem but not material solutions. Material problem, spiritual solutions. Material problem, spiritual solutions with a practical approach to the material problem. That lifts our consciousness, and that's what I find we could take from this conversation between Vritrasura and Indra. Indra, for his material problems, he was always resorting to because he would always live in anxiety and fear. What if that person takes away my mukut, my crown? So therefore he would send apsaras, he would send someone else to disturb their meditation. Or including in Vrajabhumi, he has sent the torrential rains to see that the person who Krishna was lifting the Govardhan hill, he does not come in the way. How dare he stops the yajna for and sacrifice for me? So therefore he is always living in that mode of consciousness, whereas Vritrasura has transcended this part. But at the same time, he did not stop fighting. He said, I need to do the fight. I need to fight to the best of my ability. Even after losing his arms, he did not stop the fight. He was doing his duty. So what is that verse in Bhagavad Gita which talks about this part? Which is that verse? That in any situation, one should pick up or do one's own duty. Sukha dukke same kritva labha labham jaya jayam tato yuddhava yuyasva naivam papam avapsyasi. So, do thou fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress. So you are not considering happiness nor distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, but you are doing because it's your duty and you do it. So similarly, the gamblers, they don't see whether they're going to be victorious or not. They're addicted to that, so therefore they play the game. Whether loss or gain, it doesn't matter, but they have to play the game. So similarly here you have to do your duty, but that is on an external platform, but internally the consciousness should be focused on Krishna, serving the Lord. So that we find here, Vritrasura was so eager to join his Ishtadevata. Who is Ishtadevata? Lord Sankarshan, thank you. What's the name you wanted to say? Okay, yeah, Lord Sankarshan. So he was waiting to join Lord Sankarshan, and therefore Krishna, on a lighter side, you can see that Krishna he had to speak 17 chapters to Arjuna to make him lift the weapon. Whereas Vritrasura, he spoke only a few verses, and Indra took the thunderbolt and then threw the thunderbolt at Vritrasura. So that was the potency of preaching of Vritrasura. And this eagerness will end with a bhajan, although I can't render the bhajan, but I'll recite the lyric. It is by Rupa Goswami. It is called Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande. Has anyone heard this bhajan? Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande. It says, Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande Manamanasa Madhukaram Arpaya Nijapada Pankacha Makarande. The meaning of that is, O Lord Sri Krishna, I am offering a prayer unto you. Please let the bee of mine be offered the nectarian honey of your lotus feet. Although Brahma in full samadhi cannot catch a glimpse of even a ray of the effulgence from the tips, okay, that's the second one. So, yadyapi samadhishu vidir api pasyati natava nakagra marichim idam ichchami nishamya tava achyuta tad api kripa adbhuta vichim. Although Brahma in full samadhi cannot catch a glimpse of even a ray of the effulgence from the tips of your toenails, still, O Achyuta, having heard of the waves of your astonishing mercy, I long to receive your grace. So even Lord Brahma in full samadhi cannot reach out to even the glimpse of a ray emanating from the tip of the toe, but still I know that you are merciful, so therefore I long to receive your grace. O Madhava, although I don't possess even a sesame seed of bhakti, tilamatri, bhaktir udanchati yadyapi Madhava natvayi mama tilamatri, the mama tilamatri, although I don't possess even a sesame seed of bhakti for you, still by your inconceivable power, which makes the impossible possible, please fill the desires of my heart. And what was the desire of the heart of Vritrasura? That he was waiting for the spiritual solution. He wants to join his Ishtadevata. He wants to serve him, so he wanted to get rid of the body. So we can say that overall, as a summary of today's verse is that for any material problem, be practical but give spiritual solution. That gives you the ultimate happiness, and that happiness is tested at the time of departure. And if that consciousness is retained, then one will come out successfully in the final examination, which everyone has to face one day, and that one day could be today. Hare Krishna. If any comment or any question? Yes, ma'am. To put the back to the deities. We need to be practical. Because when you are offering Pushpanjali, you do not disturb. See, Prabhupada is placed just opposite to the deities so that Prabhupada can constantly see the deities. And when you are required to do the offering of flowers, you can do that. Deliberately you do not show your back maybe, but in a situation where you're required to offer the flowers, you can do it. Yes, Mataji.
I was just wondering what inspires, what can inspire a devotee to be stronger in the sadhana? You made that point that it's very important to have strong sadhana because we'll be tested very early. Consciousness depends on sadhana, so I was wondering how we can stay inspired in sadhana.
So, a little louder, Mataji.
How can we stay inspired in sadhana? You made that point, it was very important.
How to make our sadhana inspiring. How to stay inspired. Stay with the devotees whose presence inspires you. I think this was one of the points which Jagatarani Mataji said once to us. You want to cultivate a particular aspect of Krishna consciousness. Maybe somebody does good japa, as an example, and you want to cultivate that japa. So Mataji said that be in the proximity of that devotee who does good japa. You need not rub body to body with the person. Maybe the person is chanting there at a distance, but you also chant in proximity of that. Bhakti is so contagious that you will get inspired to do the chanting as that person is doing it. So if you find devotees who are inspiring you, or you find that that particular quality you want to acquire, then be in the vicinity of those devotees. Associate with them, that's wonderful. But even if in the vicinity of them, you get that inspiration. So therefore, many devotees come to temple for Mangalarati and then do the chanting, because there are so many devotees who do wonderful chanting, and many a time if you observe carefully, devotees sit in such a way that they want to have the association of a particular devotee. Have you observed that? That we find that there are devotees, when I see in the men sitting, Prabhu sitting in the temple, always I find the same pair of devotees sitting adjacent to each other and do the chanting. I do not know whether that happens with Matajis or not. Does that happen with Matajis? When you're chanting upstairs, that same pair or in proximity you sit?
I don't have much experience.
I find that especially those you want to have the association of a particular brahmachari or a particular devotee, you find that their chanting is good, so they take their asana and sit there by side and then do the chanting with that person. So maybe next time when you do your chanting japa, if you find that somebody's chanting is really good and you feel inspired with their chanting, be in their proximity and then try to do chanting, and I'm sure that should work.
They also feel comfortable sit down with them and chant.
Yeah, possible. I think finally it looks at our own consciousness with what intention we want to associate with persons. Is it once again, am I being at the center, or am I making the other person the center? In the material world, you find that wonderful personalities who have gained name and fame, if you look at their interviews they have given, they said that although I'm a sports person, I earned so much of money, and I've earned so much of money, but that has not given me happiness. But what has given me happiness is when I'm asked to come to a particular center and do some charitable work. That charitable work gives them pleasure or happiness. So which means that from they being at the center, they make the other person as a center. And that shift makes them lift their consciousness from a lower mode, maybe mode of ignorance or passion, to mode of goodness momentarily, and therefore they experience that happiness. And for devotees, when we make a spiritual master or exalted or senior Vaishnava, the lordships happy, then we feel happy. So therefore we make them as a center and then perform our activities for their pleasure. And in the process, we become happy. So this is the spiritual platform, but on the material platform, that's what they do. So hence you find people going to orphan centers on their birthday or on their marriage day, and they do that because at least on that day, the focus is not on themselves, but focus is on them to serve, so therefore that lifts their consciousness. Yeah, any other question or comment? Grandharaj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatarobhischa krupa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.